pass it over to Ryan. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Asada. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ryan Pickering, and this is the real history of Diablo Canyon Power Plant. In talking with my grandma in preparation for this, she told me, have a great time and just tell the truth. You know, when you're talking about history, it's important to tell the truth, and you can hold me to that. I've done my best in this presentation. And, you know, this was what the land looked like before we started, industrializing it. Here's the outline for my presentation. I want to begin with a land acknowledgement, and then I'll talk about a background of my research, and I'll provide a brief history of the land, given that we have 20 plus minutes. And then we'll talk a little bit about America's original plan for zero carbon electricity. And then we'll end with a discussion about Diablo Canyon Power Plant today. The land that we're going to be talking about, both downtown San Luis Obispo and the coastline north of Avila Beach, is the ancestral homeland of Yaktichu Tichu Yaktilhini. I'll say it again. It's pretty easy to pronounce once you get your head around it. It's Yaktichu Tichu Yaktilhini. And this group of people goes back over 10,000 years, and they're part of the history of this area, and they're part of the present and the future of this area. And you can learn more about them at yttnorthernschumash.org. They're part of the greater Chumash people group, but they are an individual tribe, and they identify solely as their own tribe. And thankfully for us non-native speakers, they go by YTT for short, and that's lowercase ytt, not the YTT, just YTT. This isn't the last time I'm going to mention the tribe in my presentation, and I want to let you know that I have had this presentation proofread by the tribe, and the information I'm sharing is with their permission. Okay, me. I have worked in the solar industry for the last 12 years, and I loved it. And I designed and built over 7,300 rooftop solar power systems and 340 microgrids. So that means incorporating a battery into that. And in 2021, my interest just started expanding beyond a single technology, and I became very interested in grid level energy and what it takes to really decarbonize, not just a house or a building, but what does it take to decarbonize a whole society? And I'm on a crazy trip trying to figure out the solution to that. And my research led me to Diablo Canyon Power Plant, and we're going to talk about that some today. My objectives for this presentation is, number one, empower climate activists and advocates. I'm here with you. I've been doing this work for a long time, and I'm still learning. And I think I've developed some more effective tools. And speaking of tools, I want to show you some new tools that I've been using in my research, and hopefully you can use them as well to advocate in your own communities. And finally, I want to equip our communities for the decisions ahead. There are some pretty big things happening in San Luis Obispo that we need to understand at a deeper level in order to make decisions, or at least I think so. And I hope my presentation helps with that. Okay, let's start with the first tool. This is called Electricity Maps, and it has almost every country in the world. And if you click on the country, you can see where their energy is coming from at an instantaneous level. And then you can also sort for the past year or 5 years. And this is California over the last year. And as you can see, we have a mix of energy. And, you know, we have one nuclear power plant, and that's Diablo Canyon Power Plant right on the coast. And you can see it's producing quite a bit of electricity. Then you have some wind turbines. You have a lot of solar in California. We have over 1 million solar power systems in California alone. And that's what's making up that almost 5 gigawatts of energy per gigawatt hours per year. And then finally, you have something called natural gas. And I guess it's natural. You get it out of the ground and you burn it. And it's a remarkable substance that you can ramp up and down and get more or less power from. And natural gas is doing the heavy lifting in California today. And I think it's important to be honest about that. Once again, this is electricity maps, and I encourage you to use it to understand the energy in your area. Here's a second tool that I've been using. It's called native-land.ca. It's a Canadian database of Indigenous territories around the world. And, whenever I'm looking into an area, I love using this map to understand the Indigenous history. And when I used this tool in the area of San Luis Obispo, I found this woman, and her name is Rosario Cooper. And she was born in 1845, and she is the last speaker of a language called Tilhini, which is the capital, which is now a place of modern day San Luis Obispo. This woman was incredible, and she documented with the Smithsonian Institute her complete language, everything that she could remember, including wax cylinders of languages and songs. So we can hear Rosario speaking her language and singing songs that she grew up with. And she also documented village sites that she grew up in. And the YTT people have 6 known village sites in the San Luis Obispo area. And her help was instrumental to finding those sites. And just an incredible fact, Yaktichu Tichu Yak Tilhini in Tilhini means the people of the full moon. And Tilhini means full moon. It's the full moon language. And it's just incredible that we have a link to this Indigenous history preserved in the Smithsonian. Here's a picture of Rosario on the right with her son sitting very cool in this chair, her husband, and this was J.P. Harrington, who was an ethnographer who spent 17 weeks with her recording her language. And that's why Tilhini is such a well-preserved language today is, J.P. Harrington spent a lot of time with her and her family. This is Mona Olivas Tucker, and she is the current tribal chair of YTT. And she is actually the great granddaughter of Rosario Cooper. And so we have this very direct link to the Indigenous history among us today. And it's pretty incredible. And just look at this amazing basket. I can't imagine what they carried in there, but it looks useful, I'll tell you what. So just incredible. Okay. This is a proclamation of Indigenous Peoples Day in San Luis Obispo. And you can see, whereas San Luis Obispo is built on Tilhini homeland and villages of Indigenous people in this region. So once again, this is a known history that San Luis Obispo has been working through. And the YTT people do not have any lands of their own. They were stolen during the mission system, and they live all around San Luis Obispo today. So it's wonderful that in 2018 they gained recognition in this way. And right here on campus at CalPoly, the new dormitories are actually named after them. So there's a dormitory called Yaktichu Tichu, and there's another dormitory called Nipumo, and that's where Nipomo, the name, comes from today. And Chipatsu, which is Avila Beach, and some of their other names. So it's just incredible that as a community, we have kept this tradition alive. And it's among us, and we're using this language today because this is our Indigenous history too. If we live here, we are part of this. This isn't separate from us. This is part of our reality. And then in 2018, Jerry Brown awarded the tribe a restoration grant to restore this village called Chiiwi on the coast, very close to the nuclear power plant. And this is Chiiwi today. Just an incredible place. And the CalPoly and other groups are going to start excavating this site and looking through the history of it. Here's another picture of Chiiwi. It's just an incredible place. And a very, very healthy ecosystem that I can imagine YTT enjoyed the fish and bounty of for thousands of years. And here's YTT's conservation goals with Chiiwi. I got this slide directly from the tribe, and they are excited about preserving their history and preserving their land. Okay, here are their village sites. So Tilhini was their capital, and it's right here in modern day San Luis Obispo. And then their southernmost fishing village was in Avila Beach, Chiiwi, and then Janu, which was just north of the nuclear power plant today, and then Pepatsu. So they immigrated through these fishing villages, and Tilhini was their central homeland. And it's a nice place. Many people enjoy living there today. Okay, 2018, this is very important, y'all. California passed a historic law that said if a utility company is getting rid of some of their land, they must first provide that land option to the indigenous people of that region. And this is a very forward-looking law. And once again, California is showing leadership here by bringing a law like this to pass. And the first application when this law went into effect, you can look it up online, came from Yaktichu Tichu Yaktilhini, and they demanded 12,000 acres back. And as you can see, no formal negotiations have been initiated in the outcome slide. But a lot of folks are aware of this claim to the land, and that would be the largest land back claim in American history. We're back to the land. I want to take you back 50 years. And the tribal site of Janu is right here in this cove. This is the Sierra Club in the 1950s. Some pretty famous people here. And in the 1950s, the Sierra Club believed that burning coal and wood was going to destroy our environment. Here's one of the most famous members, Ansel Adams. He's a famous photographer, and he was a board member. Here's him a little bit older in the top left, third from the left. And Ansel Adams said nuclear energy is the only practical alternative that we have to destroying the environment with oil and coal. And we have to go back. In the 1950s, the promise of nuclear energy was tremendous. And we had these buses driving around telling people about this amazing miracle technology that produced power without pollution. And a lot of intellectuals at the time were showing that this is the future. We can completely decarbonize before decarbonizing was a thing with nuclear energy. And so in the 50s, we thought that this would replace fossil fuels. And we already saw a problem with fossil fuels 70 years ago. Here's a German report of nuclear energy taking over most of our energy needs. You can see some sun and water and miscellaneous down here, but nuclear energy would become the primary energy source of humanity by 2050, coming up. Back to the land. Well, the Sierra Club decided that this is a place that we should put nuclear energy. And at that time, the tribe was not consulted, and they decided that this cove was a perfect place to put it. Here was the first drawing of nuclear power plant, just one reactor, but it expanded to 2 in its design. And so you can see, we started modifying the land, and this is the foundation. Here's the reactor being built. And all of a sudden, we're here at the anti-nuclear movement of the 1960s. And a lot of people don't realize that the peace symbol is a nautical language for ND, or nuclear disarmament. And the peace symbol came out of the anti-war movement because nuclear weapons were the worst thing ever. And we decided we didn't want to do that anymore. But with our hatred of nuclear weapons, we also lumped in nuclear energy and began to fear nuclear energy. And San Luis Obispo became the center of the anti-nuclear movement. And here's the New York Times saying 2,000 people protested nuclear power. And this was in 1978. Mothers for Peace is a prominent group locally, and they are even, some of them are maybe on this call. They've been joining the presentation. And this is right out front of the courthouse here in San Luis Obispo. And the numbers kept growing. 20,000 people at an anti-nuclear rally in Avila Beach. This was Governor Jerry Brown in his first term speaking to 20,000 people. And he said, we should stop construction on Diablo. And then 1981, the blockade began, and people began a civil nonviolent campaign to stop construction. And this made headlines. This is right in the gate of Port San Luis, right at the entrance of Diablo Canyon Power Plant. And people were climbing the barbed wire fence to get over and to sit in protest of what they believed would destroy us all. And, you know, growing up, I thought these folks were pretty cool. And honestly, I still think they're kind of cool because they were trying to protect from something they didn't understand or know. And it seemed uncertain. And it seemed like maybe humanity had gone too far with nuclear energy. And it created a movement that echoes today. Nuclear energy is not popular globally, but things are changing. And despite the protesters' best efforts, the plant was finished and it was turned on in 1986, right around when I was born. And here it is today, looking fantastic. And this is really the magic. Sure, there's a nuclear reaction in the dome going on and it's contained inside of a steel canister. But all of this is to create steam to spin the largest generator turbine train in California. And in this big building, the long building, there are two enormous generator turbine trains that are spun by the clean steam of nuclear. This is the biggest power plant in California, and it provides 8% of our daily energy at all times. Nuclear energy was so favored by PG&E that they planned to build 4 more reactors at Diablo. Here's unit 1 and 2 on the left, and we plan to expand beyond that. And today, Diablo Canyon has produced 20% of all of the state's clean energy. Once again, going back to this slide and showing that that one nuclear power plant that we just looked at is producing 8% of our total energy today. But in 2016, California decided it was over, and we decided to close the nuclear power plant with a joint proposal. And here is that joint proposal. PG&E was pushed by Friends of Earth, which was made up by members who broke off from the Sierra Club, National Resource Defense Council, who spoke at this event, and other groups. Environment California said, hey, we need to shut Diablo down. But in 2018, new research started coming out that said, hey, maybe we should give nuclear energy a second look. And it came from that a lot of folks started descending on Diablo again, but this time to save Diablo, not to oppose it. We all went out on a boat and even looked at it in person because you can't see the plant. These are my friends, Isabel and Mark. And what we found is the place is beautiful. And there's a family of leopard sharks that lives in the cove, and they were circling our boat. It was exciting and terrifying. And this is the northernmost leopard sharks in the Pacific Ocean. And it has an incredible ecosystem and the kelp forests have been known to grow at up to 24 inches per day, marking it as the healthiest kelp forest in the Pacific Ocean. Here's me demonstrating that even though it looks big in the pictures, you can barely see it on the coast. I was fishing out there with some friends, and if you squint, you can just see the reactors. And there they are. Around this time, rallies started happening in Berlin and Belgium to save nuclear, to stand up for old nuclear power plants that were being shut down early. Also, this report came out from Stanford and MIT saying that nuclear energy is important and that Diablo can produce, is stabilizing California's grid and can be used to make clean water and clean hydrogen. And so my friends and I decided we need to throw a rally. And so right here, just where the anti-nuclear protesters were 40 years ago, my friends and I started handing out flyers to all the employees of Diablo Canyon. And we said, hey, come out on December 4th to the courthouse, and we are gonna try to get together and talk about saving the plant. And we handed out all these little flyers. And then something crazy happened. PG&E came out and they said, hey, do you guys want to take a tour of the plant? And we said, sure. So they took down all of our information because they wanted to know who we were. And then they gave us a bus ride through the plant. And so here are some of my friends. We're down in the cove. And then here's us above. I blinked in both pictures, which I will regret forever, but it's all good. And, we were just, and then they dropped us off and we went right back to handing out flyers. And, the night before the rally, we got our projector out, and then it was actually the Christmas parade or the holiday parade in San Luis Obispo, which if you haven't been is amazing. It's on December 3rd generally. And so we started projecting images on the courthouse saying, hey, come here tomorrow and we're going to talk about saving Diablo. And the next day we pumped up this big blimp and we brought it in and we tried to get as many people out there as possible. And a cast of all women stood up and talked about why Diablo is valuable. And it was a historic event. It was the biggest pro-nuclear rally in American history. And you can see in Isabel's hand, she has that report from MIT saying like, hey, scientists are saying this is important. And here were all the speakers in front of the blimp. And it was just incredible to see, women who work at the plant, scientists, educators, all saying, hey, nuclear energy is valuable. And here was one of my favorite hat. Someone made a model of Diablo saying, save me. So wrapping up here, we sent a letter to the governor, and it was signed by 80 scientists, prominent scientists. And someone else sent a letter. The YTT tribe sent a letter. And they said, hey, sounds like you folks are thinking about keeping the power plant open. I want to make sure you realize that this is our land and we are still demanding it back. And it's signed by Mona Olivas Tucker. And it was voted by the tribal council 7-0 to call the governor for land back. And this is a very significant move for the tribe. Well, look, the governor decided that we need to keep Diablo on. And so he wrote this bill, SB 846, and it has some carve outs for indigenous people in it. My friends and I went to the California Capitol the night that they were voting on it, and we even got to go in the chamber and see them vote. And we brought our projector too, and we made sure that lawmakers saw that nuclear energy is clean energy and Diablo Canyon is YTT land. It was important to our group once we met with the tribe that people know the truth about whose land this is. And amazingly, the California legislature voted 100-3 to keep the nuclear power plant on, and that surprised all of us. California doesn't like nuclear, or so we thought, yet lawmakers voted 103 to keep it. So the plant is now online for another 5 years. It was supposed to close in 2025, and now it's closing in 2030. And YTT is still calling for their land back. And, I met with the tribe multiple times over the past year, and I learned that the tribe helped build the reactors in the 1970s. They were on the concrete team that poured the foundation. And then many tribal members support the plant, and a few tribe members work at the plant today. And so that is why the tribe has allowed me on their behalf to call for land back to CalPoly and its students and say that, the governor knows, and they are partnered with the Land Conservancy to say that they want all 12,000 acres of the land surrounding the plant back. And they are happy to continue running the nuclear power plant as it brings much value and it is aligned with their goals for clean energy. But they do want to change the name of the coast. Currently, it's known as the Pecho Coast, which is a Spanish word, and they'd like it returned to their the native word for their village there called Chiiwi. And so I think Chiiwi is a pretty cool name to call the coastline. And I'm honored to call for this historic opportunity, and I hope that CalPoly will partner with the tribe to make this dream a reality. So we have decisions ahead. With the passage of the bill, Diablo Canyon will stay open until 2030, but the power plant is designed to run for another 40 years. And I think California will probably still need the power at that time unless they want to use more fossil fuels. So as we conclude, I wonder what we should do in the future. Should YTT have agency over their land moving forward? Should the plant continue to run beyond 2030? These are open questions that will need to be answered over the next 7 years. And I look forward to working through that with all of you. Thank you for this opportunity to present, and I look forward to your questions.